A cheat meal done right does not set you back. It actually speeds up fat burning, not despite eating more, because of specific biology that clean eating alone cannot trigger. Most people treat their cheat meal like a guilty secret. Eat it, regret it, try to compensate for it. That response is exactly what turns a biological tool into a fat storage event. 7 habits decide which one your cheat meal becomes. And stay with me because habit number 6 is the one that most people never connect to fat storage. The food itself is not what stores the fat. The psychological response afterward is, drop a comment right now. How often do you have a cheat meal and what does it usually look like? Why cheat meals can accelerate fat burning. Here is the biology that most diet advice never explains. When you restrict calories or eat clean consistently, one specific hormone falls: leptin. Leptin is produced by your fat cells, and its job is to tell your brain that you have adequate energy stores. When leptin is high, your brain signals that it is safe to burn stored fat freely. When you restrict calories, even for just 5 to 6 days, leptin falls. Falling leptin sends a different signal: potential famine, conserve energy, slow fat burning, make fat cells more reluctant to release what they are holding. This is why fat loss always slows after the first 1 to 2 weeks of dieting, even when nothing about the diet has changed. A single higher-calorie meal, particularly one containing carbohydrates, spikes leptin rapidly. Your brain receives the abundance signal. Fat burning rate restores. Hunger decreases in the days that follow. Fat cells become more willing to release stored fatty acids. A study published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology found that a single day of increased caloric intake after restriction produced a significant leptin spike and restored fat oxidation rates that had been suppressed by the restriction period within 24 hours. One meal, 24 hours. Fat burning restored, but only when the 7 habits around that meal are correct. When they are wrong, the same meal produces the opposite outcome. Habit number 1. One cheat meal, not one cheat day. This is the distinction most people miss entirely. Naturally lean people who allow themselves indulgences tend to have one specific meal they enjoy each week: Saturday dinner, Sunday brunch, one deliberate occasion. Not an entire day, not a weekend. One meal. Here is why that distinction matters biologically. A single higher-calorie meal spikes leptin enough to restore fat burning. The caloric surplus from one meal is manageable. Your body processes it and moves on. A full cheat day, 12 to 24 hours of unrestricted eating, creates a different situation entirely. You restore your leptin, but you simultaneously provide enough excess calories and glucose to build new visceral fat during the same window. You get the hormonal benefit and the fat gain at the same time. The net result is less fat loss over the week, not more. A study in Obesity Reviews found that a single strategic refeed meal restored leptin to baseline and reactivated fat oxidation without producing measurable fat gain, while a full refeed day produced both leptin restoration and measurable visceral fat increase. Same food, different duration, completely different outcome. Fix: one meal once per week. Enjoy it fully and without restriction within that single meal. Then return to normal eating at the very next eating occasion. And stay with me because when you have that one meal matters as much as how much you eat in it. Habit number 2 is where most people get this completely backwards without realizing it. Habit number 2, scheduling the cheat meal at dinner. This is the timing mistake that turns a strategic tool into a fat storage event. Almost universally, the cheat meal happens at dinner. Saturday night out. Friday night pizza. Special occasion evening meal. It feels natural because evenings are when social eating happens. But here's what your biology is doing at dinner time. Insulin sensitivity follows your circadian clock. It is highest in the morning and falls progressively through the afternoon and evening. The same meal eaten at lunch and at dinner produces a fundamentally different hormonal response. A study published in Current Biology measured this directly. The same high-calorie meal consumed at midday versus the evening produced 50% lower insulin response and significantly less fat storage when eaten at lunch. Same food, 50% less insulin, significantly less fat storage, just from the time of day. When you have your cheat meal at dinner, you are eating your highest calorie meal of the week at the moment your body is least equipped to handle it efficiently. More of it gets stored as fat. Less of the leptin benefit translates into actual fat burning. Fix. When you have a choice, schedule your cheat meal at lunch. Not always possible for social occasions. But when the choice exists, earlier in the day is measurably better for the same food. Now here is something you can do regardless of what time you eat the cheat meal. Habit number 3 changes the insulin response from within the meal itself. Most people never think about this. Habit number 3, eating protein. First in the cheat meal. This habit works everywhere in this series, and it works especially powerfully in a cheat meal. Watch naturally lean people at a restaurant or social gathering. Before the pizza arrives, they eat the starter. Before the pasta, they eat the protein. Before the bread, they eat whatever protein is on the plate. Not consciously, just habitually. Here's what that habit does to the cheat meal biologically. Protein eaten first creates a physical matrix in your stomach. Carbohydrates eaten afterward have to move through that matrix before reaching your small intestine. Glucose enters your bloodstream slowly and steadily rather than flooding it. GLP-1 releases from the protein before the main carbohydrate load arrives. Your brain begins receiving satiety signals earlier in the meal. You naturally eat less of the high-calorie items that follow. A study published in Diabetes Care found that protein consumed before carbohydrates in the same meal reduced post-meal insulin by 37%, regardless of the total caloric content of the meal. 37% less insulin from the same cheat meal. 37% less fat storage signal from food order alone. Fix. At your cheat meal, eat whatever protein is available first. The chicken in the pasta before the pasta. The meat on the pizza before the dough and cheese. The protein in the burger before the fries. Then, enjoy the rest of the meal without restriction. You have just reduced the fat storage impact of the entire meal by 37% with one simple sequence. But what happens in the 48 hours after the cheat meal is where most people lose all the progress the cheat meal was supposed to create. Habit number 4 is the most common way this happens. Habit number 4, cheat meal, becoming, cheat weekend. This is the mistake that erases everything. Saturday cheat meal at dinner. Feeling good, relaxed, the week went well. Sunday brunch, why not? The week doesn't start until Monday. Sunday afternoon, a few snacks while watching something. Monday slightly off track because the weekend habits are still running. One cheat meal has silently become 4 days of disrupted eating. Here's the specific biological problem. The leptin reset from a single strategic cheat meal lasts approximately 24 to 48 hours. During that window, your fat burning is restored and running. If you continue eating above maintenance across the weekend, the surplus calories overwhelm the leptin benefit. You are not in a fat-burning window. You are in a caloric surplus that builds fat despite the leptin restoration. Your entire weekly caloric deficit is erased. A study in Nutrition Journal found that participants who restricted their refeed to a single meal maintained a weekly caloric deficit and lost fat over 8 weeks, while those whose refeed extended to a full weekend gained visceral fat despite the same initial 5-day restriction. Same restriction Monday to Friday. One cheat meal group lost fat. Cheat weekend group gained fat. Fix. The cheat meal ends when the meal ends. Not when the evening ends. Not when the weekend ends. When the meal ends. The next eating occasion, whether it is a snack 2 hours later or breakfast the next morning, returns to normal. And there is one thing you can do in the first 10 minutes after the cheat meal that immediately begins reducing the fat storage impact. Most people sit down after eating. Habit number 5 changes what those 10 minutes do biologically. Habit number 5, sitting down immediately after the cheat meal. This is the simplest habit on the list. Naturally lean people at restaurants and social gatherings often suggest walking somewhere after eating, to get dessert at a different place, to continue the conversation somewhere else, to get some air. Not because they are trying to burn off the meal, just because movement after eating feels natural to them. Here is what that movement is doing. After a cheat meal, glucose is entering your bloodstream faster and in larger quantities than after any normal meal. 10 minutes of walking activates glutathione transporters in your leg muscles. These transporters pull glucose directly from your bloodstream without needing insulin to do the work. The blood sugar spike from the cheat meal is reduced significantly. Insulin does not need to rise as high because your muscles have already cleared a meaningful portion of the glucose. A study published in Sports Medicine found that a 10-minute walk after a high-calorie meal reduced post-meal blood glucose by 22% and insulin response by 18% compared to sitting after the same meal. Same cheat meal. 10-minute walk afterward. 22% lower blood sugar spike. 18% less insulin released. 18% less fat storage signal from the same food. Fix. After your cheat meal, walk for 10 minutes. Not a workout. Not a run. Just a walk around the block, to a coffee shop, to a car parked further away. 10 minutes. That is all the biology requires to meaningfully reduce the fat storage impact of the meal you just ate. Now here is the part of this video that will surprise you most. Habit number 6 has nothing to do with the food or the movement. It happens entirely in your mind after the meal, and it stores more fat than the cheat meal itself. Habit number 6. Feeling guilty after the cheat meal. This is the habit nobody expects to find on a fat loss list. You eat the cheat meal. You feel good during it. Then the meal ends and the internal conversation begins. I should not have eaten that. I have ruined the week. I need to work out extra tomorrow to compensate. Why can't I just stay on track? That dialogue feels like accountability, like discipline reasserting itself, but biologically it is a stress response. Guilt activates your HPA axis, the same system that releases cortisol during work stress, relationship tension, and a physical threat. Cortisol tells your visceral fat cells to hold on and accumulate more. The same mechanism that makes chronic work stress build belly fat is being triggered by your psychological response to eating a meal. You ate the cheat meal. Your body was handling it. The food was being processed. Then guilt produced cortisol, and the cortisol independently directed fat storage to your belly. A study published in Psychosomatic Medicine found that negative emotional responses to eating occasions produced measurable cortisol, increases that were directly correlated with subsequent visceral fat accumulation independent of the caloric content of the meal. Independent, meaning the fat gain happened because of the cortisol, not because of the food. The cheat meal did not cause the fat storage. The guilt did. Fix. Enjoy the cheat meal without guilt, without internal negotiation, and without compensation planning. The biology supports a strategic weekly cheat meal. You are not breaking the system. You are using it correctly. Eat it. Walk for 10 minutes afterward. Return to normal at the next meal. Move on completely. That is all the emotional protocol. And finally, here is the habit that ties everything together and explains why the cheat meal, when done correctly, makes fat burning faster in the following days. Habit number 7. Not understanding the leptin reset mechanism. This is the biology that makes everything else on this list make sense. People who stay lean often describe feeling more energized and less hungry in the 2 or 3 days after a satisfying indulgent meal. Not despite the higher calories. Because of what those calories did to their leptin. Here is the complete mechanism. After 5 to 6 days of clean eating and caloric restriction, leptin has fallen. Fat burning has slowed. Hunger is slightly elevated. Fat cells are holding more tightly to their stores. The cheat meal arrives, and carbohydrates enter your system in a quantity your fat cells have not seen in days. Leptin spikes within hours. Your brain receives the signal that energy is abundant. Fat burning rate restores to what it was at the beginning of the week. Hunger decreases in the days that follow. Fat cells become measurably more willing to release stored fatty acids. The days immediately after a correct cheat meal are often the most productive fat-burning days of the entire week. Not the days you were eating perfectly. The days after the cheat meal. This is the mechanism the 7 habits on this list are designed to protect. When you have one meal instead of one day, you get the leptin spike without the surplus. When you eat earlier rather than later, you get lower insulin with the same leptin benefit. When you eat protein first, you reduce the insulin impact by 37%. When you stop after the meal, you protect the weekly deficit. When you walk for 10 minutes, you reduce blood sugar and insulin by 18 to 22%. When you release guilt, you prevent cortisol from adding fat storage on top of the meal. All 7 habits are protecting the same thing: the window where the cheat meal resets your leptin, restores your fat burning, and sets you up for the most productive fat burning days of the week. 7 habits, 1 meal, the difference between fat burning and fat storing. Habit 1. What lean people do naturally. 1 cheat meal per week restores leptin and reactivates fat burning without the caloric surplus that a full cheat day produces. Habit 2. The common mistake. A cheat meal at dinner when insulin sensitivity is lowest produces up to 50% more fat storage than the same meal eaten at lunch. Habit 3. What lean people do naturally. Eating protein first in the cheat meal reduces post-meal insulin by 37% from the same food regardless of total calories. Habit 4. The common mistake. Allowing the cheat meal to extend into a cheat weekend erases the weekly caloric deficit and converts the leptin benefit into a fat-building surplus. Habit 5. What lean people do naturally. 10 minutes of walking after the cheat meal reduces post-meal blood glucose by 22% and insulin by 18% through direct muscle glucose clearance. Habit 6. The common mistake. Guilt after a cheat meal spikes cortisol and stores fat in your visceral fat cells independently of the food itself. Habit 7. What lean people do naturally. Understanding the leptin reset mechanism allows you to use the cheat meal as a deliberate fat-burning tool rather than experiencing it as a failure of discipline. Here is what I want you to take from this. The cheat meal is not cheating on your fat loss. Done correctly, it is the mechanism that keeps fat burning running across weeks and months instead of stalling after 2 weeks the way every strict diet does. 7 habits, 1 meal per week, used as a tool, not experienced as a failure. Try this approach with your next cheat meal. Come back and tell me what changed in the days that followed. Which of these 7 surprised you most today? Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one. If this changed how you think about cheat meals and belly fat, subscribe to What Science Reveals. Real science explained clearly every single week. And if you want to see how fasting habits and breakfast habits connect to the cheat meal system we covered today, those videos are right here. All 3 work together as one complete weekly eating framework. See you in the next one.